So, Aisha,
Thanks, Chris.
dare I
Good
ask,
evening.
how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Still moving along with Pye House. So a couple of weeks back, we did a little pre-site tour for a local network in Morecambe called the Bay Network. That was really great turnout. So I got an opportunity to show more local people of Morecambe what we were doing with the building. They got to see the shell of it. They got to see the drawings that we've put up for the scheme. And yeah, it was a really good turnout. I always compare this building to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. It's like it's shut down years ago and everybody knows about it, but nobody's been inside. So to me, yeah, this is my little chocolate factory where I open the doors and I go, come have a look. Not that there's that much to have a look at. It is a shell. Um, but we still get excited every single time we go in there and we can't wait to turn the vision into a reality.
Well, it's a stunning building from the outside. The architecture of it is pretty unique. There's not many Art Deco buildings left in the UK right now.
Yeah.
So you've got quite a unique find there. When I last spoke to you, you were buying the property,
Yes.
and I believe that's now all completed. Is that right?
Yeah, so bottom end of last year in December, we have now owned the property. By the time we bought it, it was pretty stressful 2 weeks as we came into purchasing it and coming off the option agreement. We did pull it off. And after we pulled it off, we went, we don't want to talk about property ever again. And then we came it back into the new year and we went, right, okay, now we're ready to talk property again. So literally myself and my business partner, Brian, we just went, oh, thank God that's over. And then we were like, now we're going to need to move to development loan as the year goes on. And that should be okay. That's going to be under our own timeline and less stressful and so on. It's not been too bad because it's easier not having a vendor, in your hair, putting pressure on you, wanting you to buy their building and being difficult with you. Um, but yeah, there's some interesting curveballs, and I think the biggest thing at the moment with property development I learn is you put one fire out and then another one pops up, and then yeah, you're battling that one, and so on and so forth. But I'm a bit of a glutton for punishment as well because I do enjoy the stress and the fire and putting it out and then going and Hashim, my 19-year-old son.
Yeah.
So he's home for the summer now. And when he wasn't home while he was at university, again, if there's anything going on, Hashim, and then he's like, just shut up, mum, calm down. There's a solution to things. You just need to keep going and you need to find the solution. So he really keeps me on the ground and my main motivator as always.
Yeah, Hashem is a lovely lad. I love chatting to him, and he's studying to be a structural engineer. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
So he needs to hurry up and help you out.
He does.
So for people joining this webinar and that are watching the recording, they might not have watched the first episode that we did. Could you just give us a bit of a recap over how you came across the project, what the plan is for it? Give us the insight into what your vision was for Pye House.
Okay, so my journey started back in 2023. That is the first time I saw this big white Art Deco building in Morecambe. And it wasn't an off-market deal. It was just sat there on the portals. We went out and we viewed it. We took our architect with us. And having had a look at it, we decided that we wanted to make some really large premium flats. So we have developed out the scheme so that the vision is it's 8 two-bed flats and they are in sizes of 75 square meters to 95 square meters. And then we've got three-bed units, which are 100 square meters to 105 square meters. So they're pretty huge in considering the stock of the area. The area's got quite small flats. These are the size of houses, in some cases even bigger than houses.
And is it right on the seafront?
No, so it's believe it or not, you've got the promenade and then it's a short walk away. So Clark Street is where the site is. So if anybody does want to look on Google Maps, Clark Street Morecambe is what you're looking for. Clark Street sits off a road called Lord Street, and Lord Street is just off the prom, but it's literally walking distance and you're there on the prom. And it's about 800 meters away from where the Eden Project site is going to be.
So it's prime location
It,
for retirement couples, um,
yeah,
potentially young professionals, but
yes,
yeah,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
a real sort of good clientele that would look to buy them.
yes, yeah.
Brilliant.
So we have ultimately, so at the moment, because we haven't built it yet, and we haven't announced it in Morecambe that it's coming soon, um, our thought at the moment is we'd like to hand it over to the residential community in Morecambe, providing obviously it's affordable for their brackets of pricing that they're looking for. However, at the same time, so a couple of weeks ago, again, I was at the Eden groundbreaking site and the consultation they did, and they're looking for contractor stays as well at the moment for all their teams that are going to be coming on site. So that's quite a big operation for them. So we started with residential, but it might change. Somebody could come in and potentially take the whole block and then use that for corporate contractor lets, possibly for serviced accommodation. Again, it just depends on what interest we get
Yeah.
because our end strategy is a build to sell scheme. We aren't planning to hold it ourselves.
So you're in terms of your exit, you've
Mm,
given yourselves flexibility,
yes.
which is a really powerful thing for a developer. Um, but it's over the last 5 months since the last time we had you on, it's not
Mm,
all been according to plan. And I think
no.
property developers expect variables and they
Mm.
expect different things to sort of be a bit more challenging than, say, most sort of property pursuits or most businesses. But you've had a bit of a baptism by fire with this one, haven't you?
Yes, so it's the first project. As I just touched on, the first time I entered the arena was 2023. When I was on the previous webinar, I talked about how I'd found the building, which I've just touched on. But then I also spoke about how the vendor walked away. So I
Mm.
want to start tonight with the five things that can kill a deal and the five things that you really could be reeling from as you enter into property development because it could be you're just not aware, it's the scale of what you're doing.
Yeah,
Uh, and you go, wow, really? Does stuff like this happen? You know, genuinely naively, you can't believe some of the stuff that
yeah,
happens to you. But the only thing I'll say is I don't know if this is a bad thing or a good thing. I'm sharing this with everybody. There's almost a sense of you become a bit desensitized to what's going on
yeah.
because of the different hurdles that you face throughout the process. And we've still got hurdles that we're going to be facing. So my first, I would say, real experience of that was when that vendor walked away in 2024. Um, and I knew it happened in houses, but I didn't think it happened in commercial buildings. I thought people who owned commercial buildings, they're really serious and, they're not going to mess you around or anything. Um, so that was the first one. And the lesson that I learnt was you can't always go for a simple exchange and delayed completion because that actually puts you as the buyer still at an open risk of them walking away. And that's what happened to me. But with hindsight now, and with Brian having come in and saved the deal at the time, he'd done an option agreement. So there was a small deposit, and for 12 months, they were not allowed to sell the building, talk to anybody else about it, or try and proposition anybody else. And that was subject to planning.
Mm.
And then at the end of the 12 months, we would either have to buy it, uh, and if it didn't meet what we needed, then we could potentially walk away. So that for me, there's got to be some sort of contract in place to protect you as the buyer, because if you think about it, you're trying to assess a building to see, is this a building worth pursuing? You might have to spend some money in a little bit of viability, feasibility to begin with, with your professionals, nothing too expensive, but still you need to put a bit of money in and a bit of effort in. especially with a building like this where you're trying to figure out how many flats you can get in, what sort of conversion you can do, what sort of planning you can get.
Mm. And in terms of the vendor, they've obviously come back round.
Yes. So the story behind that is that they, for people who remember, so there was about to be an election in May 2024, and just before the election, they walked away. Um, and I was completely thrown by that with no idea how to turn this around. And 2 months later, somebody that I knew through my mentorship, so I went through an education to learn property development, we got in touch with each other. We started talking, and I asked him to front the deal. So he went into the vendor, went in for a different asking price, agreed an option agreement, and he was the front end of the purchase. So the vendor never knew that I was involved.
Right.
And that's how we pulled off the purchase.
Fair enough. So it's just changing a few of the variables, managed to get them back on side.
Yes.
And that's all completed, all gone through now.
And that's completed and it's all gone through. As I say, the 2 weeks in December were stressful because we were coming to the end of the option and we were about to purchase this. And then we had some investor problems with one thing and another. Um, and we were literally at the end of the option. And bearing in mind, we knew these people were quite difficult people. We were like, they're just going to walk away. They're not going to allow us even any time. So Brian had to speak to them, didn't particularly relish it, but he did it. Had a chat with them. He offered them some capital to say, look, give us an extra week's extension. First, they agreed that. Then their solicitor stepped in and said, no, you don't want that. You want them to exchange and complete the following week. And let's just say Mrs. Tyson was not a happy woman. And I believe the rumours are that Mr. Tyson even got thrown out of the house for a week because he agreed a 1 week extension with Brian.
I love the fact that your default is that you've gone to Tyson as a mystery name for this individual,
So,
considering it's Morecambe.
yeah, so the reason for that is because the warehouse that we actually own was called Tyson Antiques.
Right. Oh, really?
Okay, so they owned it. And originally in 2023, when I was new and naive, and they didn't walk away from me, I was like, okay, I tell you what, I'll call it Tyson House because you've been here so many years since the 1980s.
Yeah.
And then they walked away, and then Brian came in and he said, what are we going to call it? I said, well, we're not calling it Tyson House, mate.
No, definitely not.
And then Pye House was born from the fact that Ford Motors originally had it as a showroom. That's what it was built for. So we said, okay, let's call it Pye House.
So there's still a nod back to that history then.
There's still a big nod back to that history. And I mean, it's a sympathetic restoration. We're going to be restoring the front of that building, just that we're going to modernize it and bring it up to today's standard. But it
Great.
won't be Tyson House, mate.
Love that. Um, Big issue was pricing versus viability, wasn't it?
Yes. So next challenge, pricing versus viability. So my business partner loves a good haggle. And when I went in for Morecambe, my thought was this deal stacks. I will just go in at full asking price.
Mm.
Again, naive mentality from me, if you will. If the deal's got enough in it, why do I want to try and haggle with somebody? I'll just be honest and I'll give a full price. Going back to once they did walk and Brian came in the deal, Brian said, we can bid lower for this. And I said, I know you can bid lower, but it's back on the market. Nobody knows it's back on the market. And I want you to secure it because it stacks. So he only went a very small amount, marginally lower, and he secured the deal. But many a time he said to me, you should have gone lower to be able to secure the building. We still didn't need to go as high as what we anticipated. But the reasoning behind that for me was that when we looked at this building again in terms of comparables, we were looking at the developments in Morecambe that compared to what we were trying to do with this large building. So for us, there were two major developments. One was a hotel conversion out there called Broadway One, and one was called a church conversion, which was Dalham Avenue. And those were two large old buildings which went through planning, and then they'd basically made flats, houses out of those. So when I saw Morecambe and I saw this big white building, I thought this fits for me the kind of profile that I'd want, and it fit the sort of profile that those buildings had because there's very few of these large characteristic buildings, as you pointed out just
Yeah.
at the beginning.
Yeah, I get that. Sometimes it's easier just to get the deal done, pay them what they want, because you know that the yield is in there, and that if you can just get the purchase sorted, you can just crack on and get the work, and then if it's either release the equity or you can, you know, uh, get the profit back out of the
Yes.
development, which is um it is quite straightforward thinking. And I guess from a dealing with the vendor perspective, you weren't to know that the vendor was going to mess you about. And you went in
No,
there with the best
exactly.
intentions, which actually should have built trust
Mm,
with the vendor and allowed them to have a better relationship with you. Unfortunately, that was a unique case where that didn't happen. But I
yes.
think certainly your intentions were there in the first place. Um, I think me personally, this is a bit different because when I'm sort of working with, or when I've worked with um, landlords, investors, and sort of purchasers of property, my recommendation is always to refuse the first offer from the vendor
Mm,
perspective. So that would mean that I would, as a purchaser of a property, I would find that gauge between not pissing them off and pissing them off
mm.
and start there and then work up to a budget. But I totally get the mindset of trying to just get that over the line, but it wasn't
It
to
wasn't meant to be, but more importantly, because when we looked at it from a high level perspective, and what I mean by high level perspectives is, so at this point we have the team, but we're still not getting deep enough into the cost plan. We do know what the back end sales potentially would be for it. But again, we're looking at it in a particular time in the market. So it looks like it's got enough profit in it at the back end. But then what happens is that as you go deeper in and you start building that cost plan, you get that technical design in, once you've got your planning in, then you get to see how much is being spent on various parts of the building. And so from that perspective, touch wood, we haven't had a bad experience in terms of the profit because of the fact that we already started at the top end with the profit.
mm,
So it's been cut down quite a lot, but we're still viable. We're still profitable, if that makes sense.
yeah. Aisha, you're a dream to interview because you've just set me up for my next segue, which is your next challenge, which is build costs, um,
Yes,
and the abnormalities that you can find once you actually purchase the property and get in there. So
yes.
it's no secret that when you buy a building, particularly of that sort of unique design, that age, it's probably been unloved for many, many years. There's going to be some issues. But were you finding that when you got in there, there was a little bit more than sort of scratch the surface? And we've had a turbulent market over the last few years. Have you taken that into consideration with your build costs as well?
So the first thing is that building, to give history, was built in the 1930s. The previous vendor bought it in the 1980s, and they've done nothing to keep it in good condition.
Right.
So it's literally got holes in the ceiling, it's got water ingress, it's got broken windows. It's just overall a general rust bucket and in need of some serious love. So the first challenge we had was when we got our structural report done. And we got the structural report done, and yeah, when you read through that, you really did want to run away from the building, and you got we got seriously scared, and we were like, "Oh my God, what have we bought?" And at which point, the conversation came back to, "We should have bid lower for this. We shouldn't have gone as high as we had."
Mm,
So there was an attempt to go back to the vendor to negotiate, to say, "Look, you've not looked after the building. There's a lot of structural issues in the building, and this is going to cost." Of course, them being as they weren't having a bar of it, and they refused to negotiate. So what we had to do then, well, what our project manager had to do, he's had to build in the costs as a structural works package for this deal. And he's also had to then look at the rest of the build costs in terms of the main contractor. And between all of that, and then of course looking at the finishes, because the finishes are the things that sell the product in the end, as we all know. So we've had to keep a healthy budget for the finishes as well. Now, again, the good news is that between the PM and the contractor that we've selected to work on this project, the contractor is willing to help and work with us to get it down to the budget that we need, and to also ensure that it will be in line with building regs, it will be fully compliant, and we will deliver a decent product. But again, it comes back to where we think the market will be when we sell these units, or whether we sell it as a block. And if that comes true, then we still absorb that. And
yeah,
that's how crazy this deal is. I
yeah.
cannot explain to you how mad this deal is, because it does keep taking a lot from us. And yes, we do kick ourselves. And with hindsight, or when I go for project number two, my thought is, I'm not going to go in at a high price next time. I'm going to try and go in lower and then work my way up. But that's the thing about me not having the experience. I've gone in with a different perspective. But now understanding that the more you build in, the more issues that come up, you're then chipping away at your back end values.
I love that. It's not if, it's when you start your next
Yes.
project. But all the property mentors, property gurus, they all say that, if they're worth their salt, you shouldn't make money on your first one.
Mm,
That should be your learning experience. You've got to break even, but essentially, there's not going to be much left over when you take into consideration maybe some of the things that you hadn't accounted for
mm,
versus some of the things that naturally would challenge any developer.
yes.
So to be in this position is extremely healthy considering, you know, the age of the building, the reluctance of the vendors to disclose so much information. Um, has Hashim had a look over it?
Oh yeah, Hashim's been involved in this. He looks over it. He looked over the structural report, completely followed it. I remember when we panicked about the structural report. So each month we go into the room with property CEO. It's an opportunity, if you've got projects on the go and you are facing challenges and things, you can go speak to your mentors and get second opinions. So we sheepishly sort of came into property CEO. We were like, "Oh my God, we've got this structural report. Oh my God, this is totally broken. What are we going to do with it?" And there was a structural engineer who's a mentor there, and also so it's Richard Clapson who's the mentor. He was there as well, and they looked at it and they were like, "This is not a deal breaker. This is okay. You can still work with this."
Yeah.
I mean, we were having visions of things like, "Should we just level the building and start all over again?" And they were like, "No, you don't level the building. That's not what we teach you. We teach you to convert buildings, not level buildings. You don't need to do this."
Yeah, that's project two.
Yeah. Oh no, maybe five.
So you mentioned what water ingress, and
Yes.
when we were talking off camera, you said that you'd found some asbestos, which I think is pretty much standard in properties of that age.
Yes.
But you've obviously mentioned structural issues. Is
Hmm.
there anything sort of weighing on the development that maybe you didn't expect? Is there sort of extra works that have got to take place, like potentially underpinning or anything like that?
Not at, the main challenge in the structural works is, so there is a ramp in that building. So
Right.
it leads from the ground floor to the first floor. So we're going to have to put temporary works in, to be able to pull that ramp out. That's the biggest part of the works. And then in terms of the rest of the structural works, touch wood, we haven't had anything yet that we've seen that's untoward. Everything seems to be accounted for within the build cost and within the structural works that we're going to do. So, but again, I can't say to you, guaranteed this is going to be smooth sailing because I've given up saying that phrase because nothing is ever smooth sailing. But again, talking about costs, so we do have a contingency in place. So if there are things that we are finding as we get onto site, we've put backstop in place to be able to deal with that cost.
And am I right in saying it's white render on the outside?
Yes, it's white render on the outside, and we're going to
Yeah.
redo all of that.
Well, to be fair, with white render on the outside, and if it hasn't been touched, particularly from the 80s,
No,
anything that's gone, any bit of movement will be picked up
yes,
straight away, and your
yes,
structural engineer won't
no,
won't uh, won't ignore that. So
no.
yeah, that's a massive positive and step in the right direction. Um, so moving on to your fourth challenge,
Yes,
appraisal mistakes.
yes.
Talk me through that.
So this one. So one of the things I didn't realize, and many people, I think, like me, when we enter the arena, we don't realize. We think you have a spreadsheet, you do your calculations, and when you do find that building that works, you think, okay, it works. That's okay now. I don't need to go back to it. And actually, for the 3 years I've been working on this building, we are constantly chopping and changing the appraisal, and we're constantly tracking how the costs are going and what that's looking at the back end, and also looking at in terms of the selling of the building. Again, you mentioned earlier the market shift, so the war hasn't helped. That's gone on. Um, we're looking at all those things and how they are affecting our project. Now, on the upside, we are going for a JCT project contract with our contractor, and we're looking to fix the pricing in. So hopefully, we won't have too much turbulence, I say. But again, I'm not guaranteeing it. So the mistakes, the sort of mistakes you make, and again, in the beginning when I started praising, I used to love breaking deals, and Hashim would be mad at me because he'd go, "You take a deal, you stress test it, and you take it to the point of breaking it. And once you've broken it, you go, oh, that doesn't work." And I said, "Yeah, because I want to know how far I can push it to make sure that it's stacking." So, and there were moments where I'd do a spreadsheet and I'd go, "That can't work because I've calculated something wrong." So
Hmm.
that's a me problem. And he'd go, "Why are you so pessimistic?" And I'm like, "Because that's too much of a dream to come true." So the sort of things that you can end up doing almost by hope, because you're waiting for something to stack, is you could overestimate your back end sales values when they're not actually what you think they're going to be. So that's a bit of hope capital you end up putting into it. When you're first starting off, you might not realize how many fees are involved. There's a lot of different professional fees involved. And I'm not just talking an architect, structural engineers, planning, or project managers. I'm talking about things like warranties, utility costs, especially with a building of this kind. Um, if you're not including your finance figures, so what your interest costs are, what your exit costs are, what your broker costs might be. Um, some people might put in a very small contingency, keep that healthy. Some people don't include interior design budgets. We included that in ours, and we included quite a healthy budget. Um, you don't also factor in delays. And I think that's another big one, especially with the finance, because when finance is ticking, that is eating into your profits every single day. Um, so those are the sort of things in my experience that I've come across. So when I look at a profit and I say I want a gross development profit of say 20%, 25%, I know that as we go into deeper and deeper into that project, that's going to go down. And if I'm lucky, it'll go down to about 15%. And at 15%, I know I can still make a profit.
Hmm.
But if I start at 15% and go, well, that's okay, that's 15%, that's going to be fine. I'm going to make profit off that. What actually happens is you go deeper into that project, you can calculate for yourself. You're not going to stay at 15% the deeper you go into the project, depending on the complexity of the project, of course. So potentially you'd be going down to 10%, 5%. That opens you up to the risk that a lender won't lend on that deal.
So are you going in? Did you go in with the mentality that 25%, but your sweet spot is 15%?
Yes,
That's your risk analysis based on that.
yes.
Okay, that's dead interesting. And in terms of what other developers are doing, would you say that they are,
So other developers are working on a similar basis
yeah,
because again, everybody starts by working backwards and then you build all your costs in. Now again, if you've got exits like supported living specialist housing providers, then you're in a bit of a different boat because ultimately they've already guaranteed the value that they're going to pay at the end. So with a deal like that, if say you were at even at 20% and you built it out, but there weren't too many complications or difficulties in the strip out on installing it, then potentially you could go down to 15. Even if you went down to 14 or 13, you could get away with that.
hmm. Yeah, to be honest with you, the level of sort of resilience and self-awareness you're showing, taking accountability for the figures not being right and completely putting that on yourself rather than blaming the project or the variables
Mm,
is so inspirational to see because there's so many developers out there that say this went wrong and this person did this and this didn't happen. But you're saying right from the outset that if I don't build that contingency and if I don't already have, you know, the ability to meet that 15%, then that's on me because I've got the numbers initially wrong from the beginning
yes.
for allowing for that. And I love that. That's such a positive way of thinking as opposed to it's the uncontrollables that are controlling the situation.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, with certainly from my experience in this project, you have to try and be as proactive as you can. You will end up in moments where you're in a reactive situation, but then you've got to learn to try and take control of the situation.
Mm,
But
yeah,
you've always
definitely.
got to figure it out. And you then, with each challenge that you face, you're always evaluating, you're always reflecting, and then you're always thinking, well, the next time round, okay, I didn't learn that this time round, I'll learn it next time round.
Yeah, 100%. It it's such a good way to view things because, as I say, you do see people that look to sort of um, try and blame everything else as opposed to the situation that they're in, and that can be quite unhealthy because,
Mm,
um, I mean, how many projects have you got to go through to learn that maybe it's you that could have done something differently? So we'll take it on to your fifth and final challenge, and then I'll ask you a little bit more about sort of what you're planning to do with the development, because you've got something exciting to unveil to us this evening.
yes.
So we've touched on it a little bit, but and I asked you off camera because obviously you're sort of sharing with me some of the deeper challenges and how it's been and sort of the emotional toll on the thing. And I sort of asked you, you know, do you have good people around you? And the first person that you spoke about were Hashem with such pride. Um, but I think that one of the things that kind of gets overlooked, and we've talked about accountability, is the individuals that you have on site and the people that are supporting you through this process.
Mm,
Because you've been really open and transparent about this, that this is your first project and that you are leaning or asking for and being very open about the support and help that you're getting to get this over the line, particularly when you discussed about, you know, how you sort of re-engaged the vendor and got that deal back on track. So what's it like with the sort of people that you've been surrounded by and the team that you've managed to assemble? Has that changed in any sort of meaningful sense, or is it still sort of has it brought you closer together?
So we've had from the start of the journey to now, we've had two project manager switches. One was initially, and I think, I suppose I want to start off by saying when you switch out people within your team, there's nobody that's, or no, for me at least, in my experience, I have parted ways on good terms. I've not had this sense of they've not delivered or they've not done this or they've not done that. So that's the first thing. So two project managers I had. One, he didn't quite believe when we first started going into the planning process what were doing would be successful, but that was more from a local knowledge perspective. He had his thoughts about how he thought planning processes should be. I have a mentor in Property CEO who's a planning consultant, and with it being the first big project and large project, he was my planning consultant.
Mm.
So first and foremost, if he's the planning consultant, he's the man I'm going to trust to decide the best way forward to get the planning through. So they had a bit of a mismatch, which was fine. And he just said, this isn't for me. I said, okay, that's fine. In terms of our second project manager, again, I have nothing but praises for them. Um, I think though it was just a mismatch. They at the time were a larger company and I was doing something small scale. So it just didn't fit in terms of they wanted to be involved, but they couldn't understand how to make it work. So we parted ways. And I hope that actually one day when I get this bill, I'll actually be able to call him on site and go, you know what, come over here. Let me show you what we did get up to in the end. Not to say you didn't do it, I got somebody else to do it, but he was part of the journey. And just to show him that,
Yeah,
sharing
that's a
that.
really important point. You can only really scale as big as your biggest client. And
Yeah.
if you're operating as a small developer and you've got a project management company that's coming in that's much used to, hundreds of units,
Mm,
they're probably going to be a little bit unaccustomed to the way that you work culturally, in the sense
yes.
that you will want to be a lot more hands-on with that project
Mm,
manager than, say, some of the larger house builders or developers that can just
mm,
literally cast all that off to that person and rely on them to delegate that. You still need to have your finger on the pulse with that. So that's
yes.
quite interesting.
And I think the other thing as well is that every member of your team, and we touched on this just a short while ago, they've all got to believe in the vision. They've all got to see it. They've all got to want to work together on it to
Mm.
deliver the result. And sometimes if you do have a mismatch, then you are finding that perhaps not necessarily that it's not just about the vision, but it might be there's an issue with the budget as well because they're used to working a certain level a certain way. And then they need to be shown potentially by another team member who perhaps has more experience in the smaller scale development to say, actually, this is how it works. This is how we've done it with other projects. And sometimes I think for everybody, every day is a school day and you get to learn off each other.
Mm.
And I do find that with our team that they are educating each other as well with this project because bringing people together, some of them who knew each other and some of them who don't know each other.
Yeah, you're the connecting force within that.
Yeah,
That's fair. And
yeah.
what's it like been working with some of the outside stakeholders that I guess they're part of your team, but they're not necessarily on the coal face as some of the other people. For instance, I mean, like your sort of solicitor, your
Mm.
I nearly said landlord then, your lender, um, like those kind of different sort of stakeholders within the project. How have you found dealing with them?
So again, with our solicitors, it's very much, at least my experience has been, it's very much transactional, but efficient.
Right.
And efficiency is what I look for
Yeah.
in a solicitor who's doing, property development, transacting for us, because you have two different types of solicitors. So again, just touching back to point number one right at the beginning with the vendor, one of the issues I had when I first started was I hired a conveyancing solicitor. I did not hire a property development solicitor. And I didn't find out a good few months into the transaction that actually I'd gone and picked up a conveyancing solicitor. And they are two very different creatures. And the reason for that is that a property development solicitor understands property development transactions. They understand that you have to get to a certain point before you can prove that the lender's going to give you money. You can get a rough idea of terms from them, but you won't get a full agreement in principle until you get to a closer point where you're actually going to purchase the building. And so when I had the solicitor who was a conveyancer, she was like, show me your proof of funds, show me your proof of funds. And I'm like, I can't show you my proof of funds right now. What I can show you is that here's a deposit. Yes, I can give you that. And I can also show you what the lender could give us. But I can't show you like £500,000 in a bank account. That's not going to happen.
Mm.
It's a very different beast. And even changing solicitors, they were quite upset that I changed solicitors. Yet the solicitor I then went on to use at that time, before they walked away, he was nearly there in terms of getting the contracts ready. He worked really fast and he knew exactly, what to do and what was expected. And then when Brian came in, he had his solicitor, and his solicitor understood property development as well as buy to lets. So that's quite important. Getting in terms of speed of transaction, get the wrong solicitor, and you could be tied up banging your head trying to tell this solicitor, I am not buying a vanilla house BTL. I am buying something bigger that has a lot more moving parts in it.
Yeah, that's such an important subject to touch on because obviously I've said many times my background's estate agency. So from
Mm,
my experience of property, it's just conveyancing and conveyancing is it. Um, and I hope Jess won't mind me saying who's in the audience tonight from Taylor Rose Law. Um, they were showing me sort of the levels and different departments that they have in with their real estate team from property litigation. By the way, this episode is sponsored by Taylor Rose Law. The different departments like property litigation, conveyancing. Conveyancing is just the tip of the iceberg.
mm,
Um, and when you actually get down into it, it's you need someone that actually covers all those different areas. But I love the idea that you had your expectations based on efficiency. That was the
mm.
most important thing to you, and you could convey that to the solicitor so that they could actually meet your needs based on what you were looking for.
Yes.
I really, really like that. And how did you get on with the lender? What's your
So in
interaction?
terms of the lender, we've had a broker. So the brokers worked with us, and through them we've communicated with the lender, and we secured the bridge for the purchase. And currently we are working again between the broker and the lender to now move on to the development loan. Um, Again, nothing to do with the lender or the broker, but as we know, the markets have changed.
Yeah.
So currently, we're waiting for our valuation to come back. Now, the question will be, does that shift something and then potentially cause another problem, or does it stay at a level that keeps the deal viable enough? Because again, talking about those exit strategies, you then need to see which exit strategy fits to get the development funding.
Mm.
And that's a new ball game, if you will, or a curve that I'm about to enter. So,
Well, let's get on to that because
mm.
you've got an exciting announcement tonight. And I haven't got a pot to piss in, but when you told me about it, I was like, I want to give you my money right now. So do you want to sort of share with us what you're planning to do with the development and why this is such an exciting opportunity for people to get involved with?
Yeah, so the first thing is I'm a massive fan of Eden Project and everything that they're doing out there and how they're regenerating the area. And for me to be able to come out and develop this building and hopefully turn it into a reality, this building should be ready hopefully by winter 2027. So we are going for two exit strategies at the moment, depending what happens with the funding. Um, the first one is that if people wanted to buy individual units, they could buy the individual units. But then in the last couple of weeks, we were having a little bit of a think, and we were actually thinking especially after the groundbreaking ceremony happened, and we were like, maybe we take this a step further and we open it up to say, if you want to scale a portfolio, you don't want to buy just one buy to let. you want to go bigger than that because you want to make some income, and you want it to mean something, and you want to take advantage of an area that is going to change over the coming years, then we are now looking potentially to sell off market the whole block of 11 flats
Wow.
all in one go.
So I was talking to you off camera because this is a huge opportunity right
Mm,
now, is that there are lots of people looking for blocks of apartments, blocks of flats, because there's such an opportunity to be had with them.
yes.
Um, and there, with this development, I guess there is the potential to title split once they purchased it. But even just from a property trader's mindset of taking on a development that's been done to such a high standard and been so lovingly restored, to then purchase that and then sell off the individual flats or whatever you want to do. I mean, we were talking about sort of the Eden project have got quite a big opportunity for workers and people coming into the area.
Yes.
So there's so much investment that you could do so much with that property.
You could even hold it as an asset and do, as we said, corporate lets. So Eden Project, Vinci Contractors, they're looking for housing. There are various other infrastructure companies around Morecambe, Heysham, Lancaster, who again are going to be looking for housing as well. The service accommodation providers, or there's even specialist housing companies potentially for you to be able to build some sort of wealth from the future of this. So I recently did a little bit of a deep dive on Eden Cornwall. One of my mentors suggested I just have a bit of a look at the trajectory and see how things look there. And Hashim was taken aback because in one of the reports that we saw, a house used to cost £15,000 back in the, I'd say, early 1990s. And he was like, £15,000. And then after Eden Cornwall had happened, and obviously that's a large scale project in comparison to what we've got happening in Morecambe, but the house prices in the years beyond that have gone up to 200,000. And it was just like, but it was 15,000 a moment ago that you in the 1990s, and now they're talking about 200,000. That's mad, you know. So for us, we know we're in the right area. We know whether a residential customer buys this and just sits on it and takes that capital appreciation that will be there, of some sort as a
Mm.
result. And then also, as I say, for someone who is interested in property acquisition, there's an acquisition deal on the table. And I don't think it gets better than this one, especially if you're getting ready a year before Eden actually completes the full project.
Well, Aisha, if I had any two cents to rub together, I'd be throwing at you right now because this sounds like such an exciting opportunity. It sounds like anyone that wanted to get involved in this, all the stars have aligned at once, which rarely happens in property. So,
Yeah. And then the
um,
other side is as well, we are also teaching people how to do property development, believe it or not. So we've got a live blueprint. So we have people on board already who are looking at property development deals, and they are learning off our project. So they're sharing with us in terms of the plans. We're giving them all those details, site visits. With every hurdle that we come across, we're sharing our experiences. We're teaching them as they go, in the hope that then when they get their deals, they'll be more wiser than we were when we
mm,
first started. So that we're doing an educational piece as well with this.
love that. So giving back to the property community so that they can sort of learn from some of the experiences that you've been through.
Mm.
So how do people reach out to you? How do people get hold of you if they want to find out a little bit more about the project itself, the opportunity that's coming at the end of it, or the blueprint?
So, as you mentioned earlier, I'm on UK Homes Network. So, if you want to connect with me, please do drop me a DM. That's one way. I also have an email address, Aisha at mhbqdevelopments.co.uk. And if you, do you want my mobile number or do we leave it at that? It's entirely up to you.
If you want to share that in the platform, I'd
Yeah,
recommend
can
doing
do.
it in that just because we'll put the recording out later.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
and you,
fine.
You don't want randomers from the internet
No, no,
phoning
thank
you.
you.
So yeah, just for your own privacy. But yeah, if you want
Yes,
to share that in UK Homes Network, you're more than welcome to.
perfect.
Great stuff. Well, Aisha, I've got to say, um, you are so inspirational, and the way that you conduct yourself through adversity with how professional and self-aware you are, it's it's brilliant for me as a young business owner to watch you doing that and to be able to sort of try and emulate some of the difficult and challenging situations that you've been in, and to still speak about it so positively and have such a clear vision of where you want to go. For me, that is something that I will be thinking about in some of the challenging moments that I have. Is how would I should do it? How would I should
I did see your post recently where you said you wanted to open a fish and chip shop, and Sam said you better call me along. And there are moments where I resonated with that post, and I was like, yeah, count me in as well.
It's the thing, right? Someone told me, young when I was younger, that apparently, if you wanted to open a fish and chip shop, all you need to do is go into the bank. You don't need a business plan. You just need to tell
Mm,
them you're opening a fish and chip shop, and you've got the commercial let, and they will literally throw money at you because
yeah.
they know how profitable a fish and chip shop is. So I always used to joke with my family that they're like, "Oh, how's it going? How's it going?" And you go, "Well, yeah, I love it, but I should have opened a fish and chip shop." And that's just my little joke to myself. But yeah, I don't actually fancy working in a fish and chip
No.
shop.
Mind you,
Um,
that's like me in food trucks. So I sometimes think, you know what, I wish I could have opened a food truck. Maybe that would have been easier.
mate, most people don't, people won't know this, but we had a conversation before this about the fact that we've both got fans on each other. We've got no air conditioning, and we're both going to sweat it out tonight, which is why I'm red as a lobster. So yeah, I don't think we'd last very long in food vans
No,
or fish and chip shops in this
definitely
heat.
not.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for joining us and coming back. Let us know when you're at the next stage at the development. We'd love to have you back on. And please, guys, please reach out to Aisha. There's so much you can learn about this development that we barely sort of uncovered tonight. And please do go back and watch the previous episode as well, because there was a lot of findings and a lot of learnings. It'd be great for you to compare the timeline. So yeah, please do go back and watch that. Anyway, we'll be back next week with Ryan Taylor from the compliance company. So if compliance is something you're into and you want to make sure that you're all covered on your next property development, then please do tune in for that one. Full details are in the events tab already. And we've been loving your posts coming in into UK Homes Network. So please do make sure that you are networking and using the platform to uncover the most opportunities that you can find within it. And yeah, we'll catch you all very, very soon.